like to start off by asking, who has had the biggest influence on your life when you were young?
Who are you asking?
You first.
Me first?
Ladies first.
Do you want to grab your mic?
Well, as I think many people know, the greatest influence on my early life was my mother, who supported me, who encouraged my love of animals, and the only person who didn't laugh when my dream was to grow up, go to Africa, live with animals, and write books about them. And the other influences on my early life were Dr. Dolittle and Tarzan.
I think I'd have to say with my mother as well. I grew up in Toronto on Chaplin Crescent on the Beltline Ravine, so lucky I had nature right in the backyard. And she got the idea to send me to the Royal Ontario Museum Junior Field Naturalist. And so then I realized there are other oddballs who like to do birding and that kind of thing. So from the age of 12, I got serious about nature and then had my comrades at the museum, and I became a museum groupie and hung out with that kind of species from then on, and I still am.
All right, so my question is, when you advocate for animals in the natural world, what causes you despair, and conversely, what positives do you have to share on what makes you hopeful?
Oh, okay. Well, there are too many people. There are too many of one species on the planet, and actually every single added human being, because we consume, must lower the natural world somewhat. That I understand population trends are probably going to taper off. That's one thing, but the other thing is human beings are, of the younger generation, with all due respect, are shifting, many of them are shifting away from nature. Birgit and I just returned from Texas. We woke up yesterday morning in Austin, where there's a huge conference, Last Child in the Woods, Saving Your Children from Nature Deficit Disorder, the famous book by Richard Louv, and it's his big umbrella organization, including many, many organizations, is trying to reverse this trend and put kids back in the woods. The average kid spends 7.5 hours a day, 7 days a week. They don't take the weekend off looking at a screen. And how much time does the average kid in our society spend in nature? None. And how much time did the average kid spend in nature in all previous generations? All the time. And I loved that. I suddenly had this thought when I was hearing about Jane's connecting chimps to humans and humans to chimps. We are nature, but we seem to be denying it. We're in denial, and we can do everything virtual now. And there seems to be a threat of a whole population coming up. Not everybody. There's thousands. There have never been more and this comes to the second half of my answer. There's never been more wonderful young people in the world reversing this trend and doing good for the planet than there are right now, right this minute. So that's really the second half. My reason for hope is the wonderful young people. And I'll just say this, because I'm an old guy, I was in the Federation of Ontario Naturalists on the executive, one of the very first environmental organizations in the 60s. There were almost none in the 60s. Now there are thousands. There's a book this thick of American organizations that are working in the same direction we are. So those are my reasons for hope, the young people coming along, the thousands of them, and the organizations.
Okay, well, I totally agree with you about the population, human population. And, you know, when I first went out to Tanzania, you could drive for miles and miles and miles, not through nature reserves, but just through the country, and there were animals everywhere. And the forest stretched in an unbroken line along the eastern shore of Lake Tanganyika, which is where I've done my research at Gombe, and curled round into the Great Congo Basin. And we used to talk about the equatorial forest belt. It's not a belt anymore. It's increasingly shrinking patches of forest. And it means there and just about everywhere in the world, the remaining populations of animals are very often in fragmented habitat. and there's no way of exchanging genes between them. Well, it doesn't count for birds because they can fly, but your average animal, sometimes there's a danger of inbreeding. And as populations grow in Africa, so they move into the forest, and their cattle and goats move into the forest. And so forests are diminishing. And I get extremely in despair sometimes over the pollution that we're inflicting on this planet, the agricultural, industrial, household pollution, the way that it's running from the land into the streams and out into the sea, and causing terrible pollution in the sea. Another huge cause for despair is the crippling poverty that so many people live in, because if you're really poor and you're living in the developing world, then in order to grow food to feed yourself and your family, you're going to cut down the last trees because you have no option. If you're an urban poor, you have to buy the cheapest food. You can't even ask yourself, where did it come from? How was it made? Did it harm the environment? Did it lead to cruelty to animals? And so all of these things together with our unsustainable lifestyle, I think every single person in this room has way more than we need, way more than we need. And so, you know, the hope for that part of it goes to the youth, because I think the youth are going to find it a bit easier to move in a new direction. And if we don't move in a new direction, then it's going to be too late. I firmly believe there's a window of time. And, you know, the other cause for despair is climate change. I just came from Nebraska, where it's meant to be snowing. I've been going there for, I think, 15 years to see the migration of the sandhill cranes. And it's been snowing, icy, cold, muffled up. This year, there was 80 and 90 degrees. I just talked to someone from Utah who said we didn't have a winter. In the UK, we had the worst flooding that we've ever had, I think, and we had the hottest year that we've ever had. And this pattern is replicated everywhere I go in the world.
California.
Yes, California in drought. Taiwan has imposed water restrictions too. And sub-Saharan Africa, it's leading to starvation, and all of this is leading to migration of people, climate refugees. So all of that is pretty gloomy, and I could go on because there's other things as well. But like you, Bob, I think that the young people, my work with Roots and Shoots, I always give as my first reason for hope the fact that young people, once we listen to their voices, once they understand the problems, and once they're empowered to take action, their determination is quite remarkable. So that's one reason for hope. My next reason for hope is this brain. We're coming up all the time with innovative technology that will enable us to live in greater harmony with nature. We're not using it the way we could be. There are vested interests that would prefer that some of this green energy is kept off the table. But I think the writing's on the wall that we need to move in that direction. And also, people are beginning to use this clever brain that we have to leave lighter ecological footprints in our own life. Next reason for hope, the resilience of nature. Places we've utterly destroyed can once again support life. And I think you have a perfect example of that here in Canada with Sudbury. If you look at the pictures of what it was like in the old days of copper and tin mining, it was a devastation. It was terrible. People couldn't breathe. I've heard they had to, to get to the outhouse, they would have to tie a rope from the house to the outhouse and follow it on the really bad days. And now it's beautiful, and the peregrine falcon came back. And I'm nearly finished.
No, it's okay. I want to add one reason for hope when you are finished.
All right. So I've nearly finished. So animal species on the brink can be brought back. And again, here in Canada, you have the example of the Vancouver Island marmot, have the black-footed ferret, and the whooping crane, and others too, but those are three that I've actually written about. And the next reason for hope is the indomitable human spirit, the people who tackle the seemingly impossible tasks and won't give up. And the last reason for hope I recently discovered when I was taking part in the climate march in New York, and the organizers expected 100,000 people, and there were nearly 400,000. The police had to stop it because the roads weren't wide enough. Why did this happen? Well, I was looking around, and all the people were on their little machines, and they were tweeting and twittering and Facebook, and what were they doing? Come and join us. This is fun. This is cool. You know, DiCaprio's over there, and Al Gore's here, and so this, for the first time, gives people with a passion and a cause like GMOs an ability to attract not hundreds of people to a demonstration or to a cause or to write letters, but hundreds of thousands of people, and that is a sign for hope.
And if I could add, another reason for hope that's happened in recent times is, I could call it eco-capitalism. And it sounds like I'm giving a plug for Loblaws. We like President's Choice, by the way, too. But corporations, and especially a lot of the CEOs, they've got grandkids. And they care, and there are a tremendous number of powerful, wealthy people whose hearts are changing, and they have the power in a big way to quickly change the world. This conference Birgit and I were at in Texas happened to have Laura Turner, who's Ted's daughter. She's got a very powerful organization working with getting kids out into nature. Ted Turner, as everybody knows, is a huge philanthropist, bringing the bison back and the wolves back, and some of the and recreating prairie dog towns. A little inside thing: Jane Fonda and Ted Turner fell in love in a prairie dog town. So there are a lot of powerful, big shot people with good hearts that can help with this reason for hope.
For sure. So today's youth, and we are often told that we are the future, we're the solution, and that the youth will lead us out of these problems. What do you believe is our role as the youth, and how can we affect big decisions that will have to be made?
I guess I start this time. Well, I very often attend a conference with youth, a youth conference, and there's somebody standing up, some older person standing up, and I've heard again and again this speaker saying, it's your responsibility. And it is not your responsibility. And, when every day I usually have contact with some young people, sometimes very small children, and when I look at them and think how we've harmed the planet since I was that age, I feel ashamed of my species. And so what is the role of young people? It's got to be a joint effort. It can't be just the young people, because you haven't yet had the experience. You can read, you can learn about things, but until you've actually been out in the world and taken the hits which fortune throws at you, so we need to share. And I think the Native American, the wisdom of the elders, the grandfather, I think this is a tremendously important aspect of how we're going to change the world. So the wisdom of people who've lived many years and have actually encountered change, who know what's happening from first-hand experience, but then to empower the youth to listen to from their perspective, because it's going to be different, and you're going into a world that we've harmed. We've harmed a lot. And I think that when you get a lot of young people together, inspiring each other, and you get the right people talking to them about, what direction should we go in? Do you think it's the right direction, or don't you? And then you share the ideas, and sometimes the older people, the companies, the corporations, can help you to carry out your ideas, but sometimes you need some guidance. Sometimes we need some guidance. It's a joint, our responsibility and your challenge.
I want to quote a Cowichan elder. The Cowichan Nation is right near where Birgit and I live on Salt Spring Island, over near Duncan. And his name is Quentin. I call him Fred. He's an elder, and he said, We've been talking about what kind of world are we leaving for our children. We need to start talking about what kind of children are we leaving for our world. And that's what appalls me about the majority spending 7 hours a day, 7 days a week, feeding their bodies with junk food for the body and their minds with junk food for the soul. And that's the best contribution that young people can make, because a lot of those folks are not going to listen to the old gaffers. They're going to listen to their peers and to role models that are more visible but are the same species, and they can talk back and forth. And there's a certain, I don't want to use the word bling, but it's kind of a certain attractiveness, including present company, to young people who will attract the media, attract other young people's attention, whereas the older ones wouldn't. And what springs to mind is Severin Suzuki at the big Rio conference. I don't remember what year it was, sometimes in 1992. And Severin Suzuki was 12, I believe, and she just stopped everything in his tracks with her speech. She's now grown up to be a very important woman, but there's a power to youth, to these admittedly minority, and what we need to do with the Goodall folks and the Bateman folks is work with these young people. I think this is part of the plan of today and on into the future. Metastasize these young people role models, so that it grows and grows and grows and grows. That's what I think is our task.
Okay.
And I might say young people influence their parents and their grandparents, very much so.
And could I just say, sorry, I keep thinking, these things pop into my head because I hadn't prepared anything, but often young people come up and say, what can I do? And I don't say, well, go along the side of the road and pick up empty plastic bottles. I guess that's a nice thing and it makes them feel good at heart. I say, influence your parents to vote for politicians who care about nature and science. That's the most important thing you can do. And all at least higher organisms evolved to have the adolescents or the young harass their parents. Baby birds in the nest. They got to get their parents' attention. They got to bug their parents. If I'm talking to a group of young people, raise your hands if you spend any time bugging your parents and coaxing them for stuff. Well, there's something you can coax them for how they vote with their dollars, shopping at good product lines, shopping for sustainable product lines, and to vote for the right people.
I have to add to that. When young people ask me, what can I do? I say, find something you really care about, something you're passionate about, and that's what you should do, because it's when young people become passionate, like you and the GMOs, that's when you get the youth leaders coming out. And sometimes it's a bit bewildering and young people don't quite know what to do, and that's where the youth leaders can guide them and help them.
That's what we both did.
Yep.
Back in the day.
That's right.
Thank you for that. So our next question is very interesting. What's the payoff for corporations to support youth in Canada who live in marginalized communities where there isn't a market for their products?
I read that one 2 or 3 times. I think it comes back to this eco-capitalism. I'm talking with the Todd Wilkinson, who did the biography of Ted Turner, and having a symposium on eco-capitalism and trying to attract powerful people. And an amazing number. Hank Paulson, I was hearing talked about as well. He's one of the big guys in Goldman Sachs and in all this, and getting a bad name. He does a huge amount of good, but nobody hears about it in buying up land and that kind of thing. I think there are an increasing number of people that do this, important people, as I say, just do it because it's the right thing. And there's no question, this is scientifically shown, the happiest people in the world are the ones that help others. And the happiest profession, I don't know if you've heard this, is a palliative care nurse. So people who dedicate their lives to helping others, as Albert Schweitzer said, that's the secret to happiness. And I think an increasing number of corporate people do this because they know it's the right thing to do. And I think there's a verse in the Bible somewhere about casting your bread upon the waters, and you have no idea what's going to come back to benefit, but there will be stuff come back to benefit.
And I can't really add to that because that's the only way I thought of answering this same question, is because it's the right thing to do, and because the whole social responsibility has crept into business, and more CEOs are acting because they think it's the right thing to do. And sometimes it's for good PR. And good PR is good because it adds to the number of people who buy your product. And it all goes around and around. And I think all of these things have to be a win-win situation. Yes. And the people who are helped in these marginalized communities will very likely, if they get the benefit of a good education or whatever it is that the corporation is doing for them, they will become customers in the future. So there can be a payoff in the future, even though it might not seem it at this current moment.
All right. So what would you say are the advantages and disadvantages of having youth lead campaigns or projects?
I have to start this one. Well, youth has a lot of energy. And personally, I'm not interested in having youth starting a project unless they are passionate about that project, because they won't do a good job. And when you're going to lead a project, you need to have the energy, you need to have the commitment, and you need also to work pretty hard. You can't just lead something unless you work to learn exactly about what it is that you're asking people to do. So I think that the energy of the young people is a big positive. And that doesn't mean that older people aren't energetic and motivated as well, because they are. And it comes back to what I said before. We have to work together. And I'm always talking about youth and the power of young people, but that doesn't mean that you write off the older generations, because I've already said this. And so when you have something where the young and the old are working together, I think you get your very best results. But I love working with young people. That's what I spend most of my life doing. So
I couldn't agree more. I think you've pretty well said it all. The youth have that attractiveness, and particularly, as I've already mentioned, we're trying to win over the younger generation, and you need to speak to them where they're coming from. And so that, I think, is a huge advantage.
Okay. So this last question, for me, this is the most impactful question, and I really encourage and hope all of you will think about this as well. Are you ready? Dr. Goodall, Mr. Bateman, what would you like your legacy to be?
Oh, dear. Well, I sometimes say I don't actually do any real work. People in this room do real work all the time. I just paint pictures for myself because I can't stop. And then I rant every once in a while, like you're giving me a chance to do right now. And I sometimes write letters to politicians, and sometimes they reply. I'm not going to go into particular names, who I've written and what I've written right now. So I don't know, I have no control over my legacy. I would hope that my paintings and books will perhaps, and I have seen letters and evidence they already have, influence people's lives. And it's something it's not good for the soul to dwell on compliments and flattery and all that type of stuff. So I tend to not I pay much more keen attention to those that are trying to criticize me and tear me down and say I'm not a real artist. They're more interesting. But I think it would be a good thing if my art and the Bateman Foundation has legs to go forward. A bit of a problem I've thought of for both of us when we've gone on ahead, fallen off our perches, my buddy says, will there be other Robert Batemans and Jane Goodalls there to sit on platforms like this and carry that on? And if we've been successful, there will be.
Right. I certainly agree with that last sentiment. But I'm always being asked what I want my legacy to be. And I don't really know. The thing is, I've lived, I don't know how many years you've lived, but 81 years, you go into all sorts of different directions. And every single one seems important, like alleviating poverty and trying to control greed. And I'm especially proud of having started Roots and Shoots, because this program, this movement, is now in 139 countries. Wow. And growing. And, it started with 12 high school students in Tanzania, and now there's about, I don't know, some people say it's as many as 100,000 groups, and a group can be a whole school. And we have members from preschool through university, and more people in corporations are forming groups. So it's not now limited just to youth, but it's mainly youth, of course. And, my goal is a critical mass of young people who understand that while we need money to live, it goes wrong when we start living for money. And, if that kind of thing can be a legacy, a new generation that yes, make money, please, make lots and lots of money and use it for good things. We need that money to do what we do. There's no harm in making money. There's just harm in using it all to buy another private plane or that sort of, what I'm talking about. But maybe there's an even more important legacy for me, and that is helping people to understand what animals really are. In other words, that they are sentient beings, that they have personalities, that they have emotions like ours. And I'm not talking about insects. Maybe they have emotions, but they do feel pain. And the person I know studying cockroaches says, well, they do have personality. He can tell which one is which. But you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about dogs and cats and horses and elephants and all the amazing beings that you paint, and you bring those personalities into your paintings.
Each is an individual.
As an individual. And when I first went to Cambridge, after being with the chimpanzees for about 1.5 years, I was actually taught or told, I didn't learn it, but I was told that the difference between us and the other animals was one of kind. In fact, it's not. It's one of degree, and it was the chimpanzees that first forced a lot of scientists to admit that animals did have personalities, minds, and above all emotions. Because I was categorically told that wasn't true when I got to Cambridge. And the fortunate thing is that when I was a child, I had a teacher. And not only had a wonderful mother, but I had a teacher. And it was very clear when I thought back over the lessons that he had taught me that the professors were completely wrong, even though they knew so much more than I did, because I'd never been to college. And that teacher was my dog, Rusty.